Everyone in the building knew who Cale Ashbourne was. They knew it before he walked into a room. They knew it by the way conversations dropped a little when his name came up, by the way his assistant double-checked everything twice, by the way the elevator always seemed to clear out right before he stepped in. He was 31 years old, and he ran the largest private holdings company in the northern region, and he did it the same way he did everything else, with complete and total control. Alara Voss knew none of that on her first day. She had taken the job because the salary was fair and the commute was manageable, and because her mother had been unwell for 2 years, and the medical bills did not care about Alara's feelings about corporate environments. She was 26. She had a degree she was proud of, a personality that leaned toward quiet, and a habit of noticing things other people walked past. She noticed, for example, that the coffee machine on the 14th floor had a slow drip that nobody had reported. She noticed that the woman at reception smiled at everyone except the man in the gray coat who came in every Tuesday. She noticed small things, and she remembered them. She did not expect to notice Cale Ashbourne the way she did. He came into the shared conference area on her third day, and she looked up from her work, and that was the moment, though she would not understand it until much later, that something shifted in the air between them. Not a dramatic shift, not the kind you read about. It was quieter than that, more like the way a room feels different when a window is opened. A subtle change in pressure, a new kind of awareness. She looked back at her work. He walked past without speaking. That was how it started, with nothing at all. Over the following weeks, Alara settled into her role as administrative coordinator for the Ashbourne Group's operations floor. She was good at her job in the way that steady, careful people tend to be good at things, not through flash or speed, but through reliability. She learned the schedules. She learned the preferences. She learned that Mr. Ashbourne took his coffee black with no sugar, that he preferred reports in bullet format, and that he worked later than anyone else in the building by at least 2 hours. She learned these things the way she learned everything, by paying attention. Cale, for his part, noticed her too. He would not have admitted it. He was not in the habit of admitting things that made him feel uncertain, and the awareness he had of Alara Voss made him uncertain in a way he could not name or reason through. It was not attraction, or not only that. It was something older and more insistent, something that lived lower than thought. When she was in the room, he was more aware of where she was standing than he was of whatever conversation he was supposed to be having. When she handed him a file, and her hand came close to his, something in him went very still and very alert at the same time. He told himself it meant nothing. He was disciplined. He had been disciplined since he was 22 years old, and had inherited a company and other responsibilities that no one outside his family knew about, after his father died suddenly, and left him in charge of things far larger than a business. Discipline was not optional for him. It was structural. It was the thing that held everything else up. So he told himself it meant nothing, and he went back to work, and he was very nearly convincing. The first real conversation they had was about a scheduling error. A meeting had been double booked, and 2 senior partners were about to walk into the same room, expecting different things, and Alara had caught it 40 minutes before it became a problem. She came to his office door, knocked once, and explained the situation in 3 calm sentences. He looked at her. She did not flinch. Most people flinched, or at least adjusted, when Cale Ashbourne looked at them directly. She looked back at him with the same steady attention she gave everything, waiting for a response. He gave her one. They fixed the problem. She left. He sat at his desk for a moment after she was gone, and noticed that the room felt slightly emptier than it had before she arrived. He did not examine that feeling. He opened the next document on his screen and kept working. But something had started, and the thing about something, once it starts, is that it does not care very much whether you are paying attention to it or not. Months passed. The rhythm of the office carried them forward. Alara became, in a quiet and unspoken way, the person in the building who understood how Cale operated, not because she studied him deliberately, but because she was attentive to everyone she worked with, and he was simply among them. She adjusted things before they became problems. She anticipated needs without being asked. And somewhere in the middle of all that ordinary competence, she also became, without either of them naming it, the person he was most honest with. It happened gradually. He would pass by her desk and say something about a meeting that had gone wrong, not because he needed her input, but because she would listen without performing a reaction. She would ask him a direct question when she needed to know something, and he would answer directly, because she did not respond well to being managed, and he had figured that out quickly. They did not become friends exactly. It was something harder to categorize than that. One evening, when the office had emptied out and she was finishing a report that had run long, she looked up and found him standing near the window at the end of the floor, looking out at the city. He looked, for just a moment, like a man who was very tired. She said, without thinking about it very much, "You don't have to look like that when no one is watching." He turned. "Like what?" "Like everything is fine." He was quiet for a moment. Then he came and sat in the chair across from her desk, which he had never done before, and he told her about his father. Not the official story, the version that appeared in the company history, the real one, how it had happened fast, and how he had not been given time to grieve because there were too many things to hold together, and how he had turned the grief into work, because work was something he could control, and grief was not. She listened. She did not tell him she was sorry. He had heard that from everyone, and it had stopped meaning anything. She just listened, and when he was done, she said, "That sounds very heavy to carry for 9 years." He looked at her, like she had said something surprising. She had not thought it was surprising at all. He left shortly after that, but he came back the next evening, and the one after that, and those conversations became the quietest and most honest part of his days, a space where he was not the alpha king of anything, just a person talking to another person who paid attention. What Alara did not know was what Cale was, what lived inside him, what the restlessness he felt in her presence really meant. His family carried something ancient and extraordinary, and it had passed to him along with the company and the weight of everything else. The connection he felt toward her was not random. It had a name, in his world. It had laws around it, and those laws said that what he felt was permanent. He knew this. His instincts had known it from her third day in the building. He told himself he had reasons to ignore it. The most solid of those reasons was this: a partnership had been arranged between his family and another. It was not romantic in the way ordinary people thought of romance. It was strategic. It was meant to stabilize things, to create an alliance that would benefit people who depended on him. He had agreed to it 2 years before Alara arrived, during a period when he had believed, genuinely, that he did not need the kind of connection he was now sitting across from every evening. He had been wrong. He was beginning to understand how wrong he had been, but he was also a man who had made promises, and who believed that breaking them had consequences that spread outward, beyond himself, to people who had not chosen to be part of his failure. So he held both things at the same time, what he felt and what he had agreed to, and he did not tell Alara either of them. He told himself he was protecting her from a world she did not know about. He told himself it was the responsible choice. He was very good at telling himself things. Alara learned the truth on a Wednesday afternoon in February. She was walking down the third-floor hallway toward the copy room, and she overheard 2 women from the legal department talking in the alcove near the printer. They were not speaking quietly. They were talking about the announcement. Had she heard? Was it not interesting? Mr. Ashbourne, the arrangement, the woman from the Western family, the formal dinner that had been scheduled for the following month. Alara stopped walking. She stood in the hallway for a moment with the papers still in her hand, and then she continued to the copy room, and she made the copies she needed, and she walked back to her desk, and she sat down and finished the rest of her workday. She was very good at finishing things. That evening, alone in her apartment, she sat on her kitchen floor with her back against the cabinets, and she let herself feel the full weight of it. She was careful about this. She gave herself the evening, and she was honest with herself in a way she always tried to be. She had hoped for something. She had not said it out loud, not even to herself, but it had been there in the background of all those evening conversations, in the way she had started looking forward to them, in the way the building felt different on the days he was traveling. She had hoped, and it was reasonable to grieve a hope, even if it had never been spoken. She grieved it, and then she got up off the floor, and she made herself a cup of tea, and she thought clearly about what came next. The next morning, she wrote her resignation letter. It was 1 page. It was professional and clean, and it contained no accusations and no explanations beyond the words, personal reasons. It thanked him for the opportunity. It offered 4 weeks' notice. It was the kind of letter that left no room for conversation, which was deliberate. She was not interested in a conversation. A conversation would have made it harder to be clear-headed, and she needed to be clear-headed. She placed it in an envelope and took it to his office. He was standing at his desk when she came in, looking at something on his screen. He turned when she knocked. She held out the envelope without speaking. He looked at it. Something changed in his face. A tightening around the eyes. A stillness that was different from his usual stillness. He took the envelope. She turned and walked out. He stood there after she had gone, and he looked at what was in his hands. And something inside him, the part of him that was older than his career, and his responsibility, and all the careful decisions he had made, pulled so sharply it almost felt physical. He could feel how wrong this was. Not wrong the way a poor business decision was wrong. Wrong in a deeper and more essential way. The kind of wrong that does not get corrected by time. He told himself it was better this way. He told himself she was safer outside his world. He told himself she would find something ordinary and good, and she would be happy, and that was the right outcome. He told himself all of it, and then he picked up the pen on his desk, and he countersigned the acceptance of her resignation, and he put it in the outgoing documents tray. It was the worst decision he had ever made. He would not know that for certain until later, but some part of him knew it even then, standing at his desk in the quiet of his office, listening to the ordinary sounds of the building around him, and noticing how empty they sounded. 3 weeks later, on a Thursday in October, she left. He was at his window when she came through the lobby below. He told himself he was looking at the street, not at her. He watched her reach the pavement and turn left, and walk to the corner, and then she was gone around the edge of the building, and he could not see her anymore. He stood at the window for another minute. Then he turned back to his work. The weeks after she left were a different kind of education. He had not understood, not fully, how much of his stability had been quietly built around her, not her presence in a dramatic or obvious way, but around the small and daily things, the way she organized information so that it made sense to him, the way she asked him direct questions that required direct answers, the way those evening conversations had given him somewhere to put things that would otherwise just accumulate inside him with no exit. Without those things, he noticed their absence the way you notice a sound you have been hearing for so long that you have stopped registering it. Only now that it was gone, the silence was loud. He stopped sleeping well. He found himself mid-conversation in meetings, and unable to account for the last 30 seconds, he sat at his desk some evenings and opened no documents and did nothing at all, which had never happened to him before in his adult life. His choices caught up with him. There was a woman in his family, older than him by many years, who had known his father and had known his grandfather before that, who came to see him one evening and sat across from him in his office and looked at him for a long moment and then said, without softness, "You know what you did." He did not argue with her. He was done arguing with the truth. She said, "You made a decision with your head about something that does not belong to the head, and now you are living in it. And the question is whether you are going to keep living in it or whether you are going to do something harder." After she left, he sat in the quiet for a long time. He thought about Alara on her kitchen floor, though he did not know she had been there. He thought about what it had cost her to write that letter so cleanly, to hand it to him without a scene, to walk out with her chin level and her pace steady. She had more courage in the small, quiet moments than most people showed in the dramatic ones. He had seen it every day for months, and he had not let himself call it what it was. He called off the arrangement. It was complicated, and it cost him politically, and he did it anyway, because there was nothing to build on if he did not first correct the most fundamental error he had made. He found her address. He drove to her building on a cold November evening, and he stood outside it, and he felt, for the first time in his adult life, the full experience of not being in control, of being the person who had to ask, rather than the one who decided. It was uncomfortable, in a way nothing else had ever been uncomfortable. He stayed anyway. She opened the door and she looked at him, and she was not surprised. She had always been better at reading situations than he was. He said, "I let you go. I knew what I was doing, and I let you go, and I have no defense for that. I can explain, but I know an explanation is not the same thing as a reason good enough to undo it." She was quiet. She looked at him for a long moment, and he could see her thinking, carefully, honestly, the way she did everything. "I believe you," she said finally. "I also don't know yet what to do with that." "I know," he said. And then he did something he almost never did. He said nothing else. He did not fill the silence. He did not press. He had learned, in the long weeks of her absence, that not every silence needed to be controlled. She stepped back from the doorway. "Come in," she said. "I'll put the kettle on." It was not an ending. He understood that. It was not forgiveness, or resolution, or the smooth conclusion to a story that had been harder than it needed to be. It was something smaller, and more real than that. It was a door left open, a beginning made out of the pieces of something he had almost entirely destroyed. He followed her inside, and the door closed behind him, and outside the city continued doing what cities do, moving and humming, and carrying all its people forward into whatever came next. He sat at her kitchen table while she filled the kettle, and for the first time in a very long time, he was not performing anything. He was not managing a situation, or holding a position, or making a calculated choice. He was just there, in a small kitchen, on a November evening, hoping that the person across the room would give him the chance to be better than he had been. He did not know if she would. That was the part he could not control. But he was beginning to understand, slowly, and at considerable cost, that not being in control was not the same thing as being lost. Sometimes, it just meant you had finally arrived at the place where the real work began. And for the first time in 9 years, Cale Ashbourne was willing to do that work.